Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and welcome to my video on the 10 best time travel episodes in Star Trek, time travel and time anomaly episodes. So this includes fractured time, time loops, etc., etc. This list is based solely on my opinion and my opinion alone. So if you disagree, that's okay. We can talk nicely and respectfully. Please leave your opinion in the comments below. What did I leave out? What would you have added? What order would you have changed? Personally, it's okay. Everybody's got their own opinion, and this list is my opinion. This is part of a monthly series of videos in which I pick a category and then I give you the worst and the best in that category. This month's category is time travel. My worst time travel episode list is already up there, so please check that out. A link to that will be at the end of this video. Now, I have to tell you real quickly before I dive into this that there are certain episodes that you might consider time travel that I am leaving out and holding off for next month, when next month's category will be parallel universe and alternate timeline episodes. And the reason why I'm saving some alternate timeline episodes for next month is to balance things out a little bit more, because there's an oversaturation of great time travel and time anomaly episodes and not really a whole lot of parallel universe episodes, but I wanted to do parallel universe. So in order to kind of balance things out and make it work, I've decided to hold over certain episodes for next month. And what I decided to do is look at what if scenarios, you know, like the Marvel what if comics, or what if television show, what if Wolverine killed Hawk? What if Peggy Carter took the super soldier serum, etc., etc. In the Marvel Universe, those are parallel universes. In Star Trek, the what if scenario tends to be alternate timeline episodes, but I kind of view them as being very, very similar to parallel universe episodes. We have alternate versions of our characters, alternate events happening. So those alternate timeline episodes will be held out of this month's list and held forward to next month's parallel universe and alternate timeline list. So there are 4 episodes that qualify for that. All 4 of them will either be in my worst or best list next month and will not be here. So very quickly, that is yesterday's Enterprise from Star Trek The Next Generation, Non Sequitur from Star Trek Voyager, Twilight from Star Trek Enterprise, and A Quality of Mercy from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So those episodes will not be in the time travel time anomaly list. Instead, they will be lopped together with the parallel universe and alternate timeline list to kind of balance things out, make things a little more even. Even with holding off those alternate timeline episodes, I still have a ton of time travel episodes that I love that I could not fit into a top 10. So I'm going to do something I don't often do and won't often do, which is to give you a few honorable mentions before I dive into the top 10. So these are episodes that I love but couldn't find a place for in my top 10. So very quickly, let me go through that list. So my honorable mention list is Past Tense, Parts 1 and 2 from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Eye of the Needle from Star Trek Voyager, Shockwave, Parts 1 and 2 from Star Trek Enterprise, and Time Amok from Star Trek Prodigy, the only episode of Prodigy that I actually like. Those are all brilliant time travel or time anomaly episodes that I just couldn't quite fit onto this list, but I wanted to throw them out there really quickly. Now, with all of that finally out of the way, let's go ahead and dive headfirst into my top 10 proper. Here are my 10 favorite time travel episodes in Star Trek. Number 10! And number 10 on my best time travel episode list is Shattered from Star Trek Voyager, which I think was also number 10 on my favorite Star Trek Voyager episodes. I really love this episode. It was the ending that Voyager really deserved. Now, I don't hate Endgame as much as some other people do, but I do think that this was more In line with all good things from the Next Generation, and using a time anomaly to wrap up the series in a little better way. And most importantly, this episode brings us back the wonderful Chakotay and Janeway dynamic that was so prevalent in earlier seasons. One of the best scenes in all of Star Trek, in my opinion, is between Chakotay and Janeway in the Scorpion episodes, and they kind of moved away from that in season 6 and 7 for the Doctor and the 7 of 9 show. So this episode is really getting back to its roots, and it uses time in a very creative way in order to do that. So I absolutely love it. Now, I've heard the complaint that they just happen to fracture time into important events of the ship, and wouldn't it just be some random times? No, it wouldn't be, because this is on TV. You gotta suspend some disbelief. Come on, people. This is a great episode, and it is number 10 on my list of best time travel episodes in Star Trek.
Number 9. Number 9. Number 9.
At number 9, Calls and Effect from Star Trek The Next Generation. This was actually the very first time loop story of any type that I had ever seen, because this episode actually aired before Groundhog Day came out, and I still kind of think of it as the best time loop story ever done. I do feel like that it is not repetitive at all. I think that there are very subtle differences between each time loop, and I think that subtlety is absolutely brilliant. It is extremely well written, and I absolutely love how Data solves the issue with the number 3, and realizing that stands for the 3 pips on Riker's collar, and that they need to listen to Riker. And overall, just a really great ensemble episode of The Next Generation, which I always love when The Next Generation is able to pull that off. And I'm going to talk about another great ensemble episode a little bit later on in this countdown, because they like to use their ensemble in great time travel and time anomaly episodes. At number 8, Timescape from Star Trek The Next Generation. This episode gets into frozen time. So in a certain area of space, if you are in it, you are frozen in time. And if you enter that area of space, unless you wear these nifty little armbands that Data, Picard, and Troy wear, you will also become frozen in time. And this was such a fascinating mystery episode, because you don't know exactly what's happening, and they subvert your expectations by making it appear as if the Romulans are the villains, when in fact they were actually just trying to help out the Enterprise, and it turns out these other aliens are really responsible for the time freezing. All this played out really nicely on screen. We get some great character interactions between Picard, Data, and Troy all throughout this episode. Absolutely one of my favorite time anomaly episodes, but also just one of my favorite episodes in general. Number 7. And number 7, Timeless from Star Trek Voyager. This to me is hands down the best Harry Kim episode ever made. I have never really liked Harry Kim, especially not as much as other people seem to. To me, he was always a little too golly gee willikers for my taste. Way too innocent and too naive and never changing. No wonder he never got promoted. But in this episode, they show a darker side of Harry Kim, and they do this by showing how regret would affect him over a long period of time, and how the future version of Harry Kim wants nothing more than to change the past. And I actually do really appreciate how this episode is able to get us to root for the people who are trying to change the timeline. I mean, Captain LaForge is kind of in the right, and yet we are still cheering on Harry Kim and Chakotay because we want Harry Kim to have a second chance. And of course, we want the show to continue onward, and the only way for that to happen is for them to change the timeline. But typically, I don't like it when characters are trying to change the timeline, i.e. Assignment Earth, but in this episode, it really works well. The air kicks on number 6. At number 6, All Good Things from Star Trek The Next Generation. I've already referenced this episode a couple times in this video. This is the great ensemble episode I referred to earlier. It does key in on Picard and Q. However, it's the interactions with the other members of the crew in each particular timeline that really makes this episode great. I also talked about Shattered and how that would have been a better way to end Voyager, much in the same way that All Good Things ended The Next Generation, as this is one of the greatest series finales of all time. And I love this kind of herky-jerky style of time travel, which I first saw in Slaughterhouse-5. I actually read the book first, and then I saw the weird movie, and then this is also utilized brilliantly in the Lost episode, The Constant, where a character will be in the middle of a sentence and all of a sudden they jump to another time period, and they use that method of time travel to perfection in this episode to tell an amazing wrap-up story for this amazing series of television.
Number 5.
At number 5, The Visitor from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So just as timeless as probably the best Harry Kim episode, this is probably the best Jake Sisko episode, even though Cyril Lofton doesn't get to be the one to play Jake in this episode. We do get a really powerful performance by Tony Todd, who of course also plays Kern, Worf's brother in the Star Trek universe. I always love it when Deep Space Nine explored the Jake and Ben Sisko relationship, because there's a very strong bond that these two had, having lost their wife and mother respectively, and how they have to band together in order to move on. And I wish that we got to explore that a little bit more in the show, but here they do it the absolute best, using this really interesting concept of this time anchor where Ben Sisko is anchored to Jake and reappears to him all throughout the years, even though no time is passing at all for Ben Sisko. And the way that Jake has to come to the conclusion that the only way to save his father is to kill himself was an extremely powerful scene, and one of the more powerful scenes in Deep Space Nine. I wish that this wasn't taking place in that crappy Season 4 Klingon bullshit, which I don't like. Thankfully, in Season 5 of Deep Space Nine, they do get back to the Dominion, which is where the show should have been always focused. I don't like how in this future the Klingons take over the station. That's kind of dumb, but other than that, I really love this episode, and it is an extremely powerful use of a time anomaly in order to show us this really powerful bond between father and son. 4? At number 4, Blink of an Eye from Star Trek Voyager. So this concept of time dilation, where time moves quicker in certain places and slower in other places, is a concept I've always been fascinated by, ever since I first heard about it from Einstein's theory of relativity, that supposedly that's the theory, that if a person were to travel light speed and leave Earth, and they would come back and 10 minutes might have passed for them, but 10 years will have passed for everybody else. Always found that concept interesting and always wanted Star Trek to explore it. Now, they never really explain how these starships themselves get past Einstein's theory of relativity, something warp drive. But I am so glad that they finally had an episode where they visit a planet where time is moving at different rates. It really allowed them to tell a very fascinating story about a planet and how it develops over a period of time, and I absolutely enjoyed this episode quite a lot. It was the best episode by far of an otherwise lackluster season, in my opinion, of Voyager Season 6, but it is number 4 on my list of time travel and time anomaly episodes.
Number 3.
At number 3, Visionary from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So at the top of this video, I kind of talked about how, everyone has their own opinions, and if you disagree, please feel free to respectfully put your opinions in the comments below. Well, I recently did the same thing on the Trek Culture channel, because they had a video on the top 10 worst time travel episodes in Star Trek, and this made their list, and I could not possibly disagree with that more, but I was very respectful in my comment. I think their main point was that, oh, well, the station blowing up, that's just ridiculous, that's just too high of a stakes, like, the stakes don't need to be that high in order for the episode to work. And yet, at the beginning of that same video, they talked about Cause and Effect as being a good time travel episode. Guess what the stakes are in Cause and Effect? The Enterprise blowing up. And I feel like that's a very common thing in Star Trek, that the stakes are very large like that. So I felt like they were kind of nitpicking on this episode. But those are the reasons why I disagree with Trek culture, but the reasons why I absolutely love this episode. I've talked about it in other videos. It is also very high up on my top 10 favorite Deep Space Nine episodes. First of all, the type of time travel that they use here is the most interesting to me, where it's personal time travel, where O'Brien is just traveling within his own life, and not some grand, oh, we're gonna stop the Nazis from taking over, or blah blah blah. And those episodes can be good as well, but it's really fascinating when it's very character focused. And the conversation between the two O'Briens is one of the best scenes of the episode, and maybe one of the best scenes in Deep Space Nine. And the fact that the wrong O'Brien goes back, that just blows my mind every time. And now, beyond just the time travel stuff, I think this is just a great episode of Deep Space Nine. This is a sneaky good ensemble episode, even though it focuses on Chief O'Brien. A lot of characters get great lines. Quark, Odo, Kira, Captain Sisko all have great moments in this episode. It's actually a very sneaky good ensemble episode. And for me, you may see this again on my most underrated episode list, which is something I'm going to do in a month or two, so keep an eye out for that, because I absolutely love this episode. It is my third favorite time travel episode in all of Star Trek.
Number 2.
At number 2, Year of Hell from Star Trek Voyager. Voyager has a lot of really great time travel and time anomaly episodes. Generally, I don't like Voyager overall. I think it's one of the weaker Star Trek shows, but they do time travel well. I don't know what to tell you. So this one I did consider for holding off for next month's Alternate Timeline and Parallel Universe Top 10s. But since the timeline actually changes multiple times throughout this two-parter, and it doesn't really play like a straight-up parallel universe type episode with alternate versions of the characters the way that a Quality Mercy or Yesterday's Enterprise would play, I decided to go ahead and put it in this list, and it comes all the way up at number 2 as my second favorite time travel or time anomaly episode. So the time anomalies used in this episode is really interesting. That's kind of an underrated aspect of this episode. This idea that these people have this machine that can change the timeline to make them more powerful is a really interesting one. And we get a fantastic performance as the villain in this episode from Kurtwood Smith. Even though I kept expecting to call everybody a dumbass whenever I watch this episode, he is a fantastic villain and has great interactions with Chakotay throughout this episode and becomes a very relatable villain as far as villains go. But what really, of course, makes this episode great for me is seeing what Voyager would be like actually going through hell, which is personally something I think that the ship should have gone through anyways, being so disconnected from the Federation for so long, and I think the show would have been better off for it personally, but I settle for this great two-parter. And of course, you can't forget the great one-liner at the end, time's up. I mean, it's so cheesy, yet so great. Love these episodes, love them, love them, love them, and they are my second favorite all-time time travel episodes. Number 1! And the number 1 best time travel episode in Star Trek is City on the Edge of Forever. Now, if you saw my romance top 10s last month, you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, didn't you have City on the Edge of Forever as number 1 In the romance category too, yes, but I promise you, City on the Edge of Forever is not going to be number one best of everything. In fact, as far as the other top 10s I have planned in the future, alternate timelines and parallel universes, it won't be number one there, don't worry. And then I have an underrated and overrated list. I have holodecks coming up, all kinds of different things that City on the Edge of Forever will not qualify for. So it's not going to be number one on everything, but it has to be number one on not only the romance category, but of time travel. And just because it is the ultimate, it is the OG time travel episode in Star Trek. Not that it's the first, because it isn't the first, but it is the first really great one, and it's the first really great one that I ever saw, so it just will always have a place in my heart. I mean, for one thing, this episode introduces the iconic Guardian of Forever. But more than that, the time travel logic is clean. It still holds up years later. And if you saw my worst time travel episode list, you know that time travel logic is important to me. But what makes this number one is the same thing that made this the number one romance and relationship in Star Trek last month, which is that extraordinarily emotional ending where Kirk has to make the impossible choice to allow Edith Keeler to die in order to save the timeline. It gets me every time. And the ending where Kirk just can't even deal with it anymore and says, let's get the hell out of here. That is so powerful. I don't care what anyone says to me, this will always be the all-time great in Star Trek time travel episodes. And that is why it is number one on the best time travel Star Trek episodes of all time list. Thanks so much for joining me for this month's top 10 category time travel. I apologize if I have a little bit of frog in my throat in the second half of this video. I was recording it as I was recovering from a cold, but I will be fully recovered and will return next month, so please join me and subscribe, and I'll see you real soon.